Afternoon, and thanks for the invitation. We're going to talk on spinal SBRT and related complications and do's and don'ts of spinal SBRT. Now, when we talk about spinal SBRT, the latest study by Arjun Sehgal, which is the randomized study between 3D CRT and conventional fractional radiation and stereotactic radiotherapy, has shown that 24 grade 2 fractions is superior to 25 in 5 in improving the complete response to pain. So now the SBRT is the standard of care in most of the spinal metastasis. So as it is now the standard of care, the complication profiles need to be taken into account very seriously. Now, if you see the same paper little more carefully, in 1 month, there is not much difference in terms of complete response between conventional fractionation and stereotactic. Whereas in 3 months, there's a 35% patient have a complete response compared to 14%, which has been maintained at 6 months follow-up. It shows that patients who are more than 3 months or more alive and under follow-up, they do have the benefit of doing an SBRT. Now, if you see the toxicity profile of the same study, the pain score is same between conventional fractionation and stereotactic radiotherapy. It is around 4 to 5%, and vertebral compression fracture is 1% in both the groups. But if you see a little carefully, it is a grade 4 toxicity, means requiring stabilization or surgical interventions is in 1% in both the arms. But if you see the compression fracture, it is around 11% in the stereotactic arm and 17% in the conventional fractionation arm. So the 10% of the patients will have some kind of compression fracture that need to be taken into account after SBRT. Now, if you see the toxicities after SBRT spine, pain flare is 20 to 68% in all the series. Esophagitis is 2%. Fatigue happens grade 2 or above in 20 to 40% of the patients. Nausea, vomiting 5 to 10% in different series. And skin or dermatitis change dermatitis are rare. It is 5% of the patients do have significant toxicity, means grade 3 or above toxicities, which requires some kind of intervention. But 15 to 20% of the patients have grade 2 or above toxicity, which needs some kind of attention. That is something which need to be taken into account very seriously. Now, this toxicity profile has come from highly specialized centers, from experts in SBRT. So if a smaller centers or centers where the SBRT program is starting, the complication profiles will be much higher than what is published in literature. So that need to be taken into account before considering SBRT spine. Now, about the late toxicities, discoloration and fibrosis less than 5% in 5% of the cases. Vertebral compression fracture, which is a serious complication, which happens in 11 to 39% of the patients in different series. Radiation myelitis is 1%, which may be the limiting factor for SBRT spine, and we have to work on that. Radiation myelitis esophageal structures are really rare, which is less than 1% of the patients do have. So if we have a better case selection, we optimize the treatment and contouring and have accurate immobilization and treatment delivery, then the risk of complications are much less and will be as per the published literature. Now, in case of case selections, it is the standard is patients with spine or paraspinal metastases, 3 or less spinal involvement, KPS is more than 50, or limited extracranial disease, which are taken into account for SBRT spine. But it should be a stable spine, which is seen by the SIN score, low-grade epidural disease, which is seen by the Bilski grade, and life expectancy more than 3 months, which is seen by the prime score or similar kind of scoring system, which need to be there. So patients with stable spine, without spinal canal compromise, with low volume disease, without prior radiation, with good performance status, are the ideal candidate for spine SBRT with low complications. Whereas if we take patients who have a worsening neurological deficit or inability to lie down flat because of unstable spine, or spinal canal is compromised more than 25%, then chance of complications are really high. So we should avoid those patients for spinal SBRT. Now, if you see these scoring systems, the PRISM scoring system, which actually tells us that the prognosis, whether the patient is going to live long or not to get the benefit of SBRT. Group 1 and 2, where the patients expect to live long, are the candidate for spinal SBRT. In spinal epidural compression scale, it is the Bilski scoring system, where the grade 0 to grade 1B, where minimal epidural space involvement is there, SBRT spine is indicated. If we treat patients who have a definite epidural space involvement, then either there will be chance of marginal recurrences because we will give less dose to that area, or we'll have myelopathy because spinal cord is going to get less dose. So those patients we need to consider for surgery if the spinal cord, this epidural space is involved. In SINS coding, which is the spinal stability scoring system, 0 to 6, which is the stable spine, should be treated. If you are treating unstable spine or 7 or more score of SINS score, then chance of vertebral compression fracture will be high. So we should avoid those patients for SBRT. Now, if you compare the toxicity profiles of conventional fractionation radiation and SBRT, pain flare is 15 to 20% with conventional fractionation, where it is 23 to 68% with SBRT, a little on the higher side. Compression factor is usually 2 to 4% with conventional fractionation, where it is 11 to 39% in different series with SBRT, which is also on the higher side. Myelopathy, skin changes, esophageal necrosis are almost similar, but myelopathy need to be considered little seriously because it is a severe complications, and we are going to talk about it. Now, about the response, 60% of the patients with conventional fraction have a significant pain control, whereas 90% with SBRT. And complete pain control is 0 to 24% with conventional fraction, whereas it is 46 to 92% with SBRT. So there is a significant pain control, local control with patients treated with SBRT. On the same time, there is a little higher incidence of pain flare and vertebral compression fractures that need to be taken into account before we plan SBRT for any patient. Now, if we talk about pain flare, which is a very common complications after the SBRT, 23 to 68% of the patients do observe this pain flare, and it is usually non-trivial, usually self-limiting. But if we give prophylactic dose of dexamethasone 4 to 8 milligram daily before starting radiation, then the pain flare complication will reduce from 68% to 19%. So as a standard, all patients getting SBRT spine should receive prophylactic dexamethasone before starting the radiation. Now, about vertebral compression fracture, the cumulative incidence is 11 to 39%, but patients receiving more than 24 gray in single fraction have a 34% risk of vertebral compression fracture, whereas less than 23 gray, 16 gray is only 19%, and patients receiving 1310 is vertebral compression fracture risk is only 3%. So patients have a poor SINS score, light lesions, spinal deformity are at higher risk, and usually this vertebral compression fracture happens in 2.5 to 3 months after the radiation is done. But very interesting thing is 50% of these vertebral compression fractures are diagnosed on radiology, and usually they are grade 1 and asymptomatic. They don't need any kind of treatment. Only 5% of the vertebral compression fractures are grade 3 or above, which need surgery. So vertebral compression fracture mostly are diagnosed on radiological imaging, but they not have any symptoms, or they may not need any kind of treatment in most of the cases. Now, these three series with MSKCC, MD Anderson, and Cunha series, which have shown that in MSKCC series, when they have treated 24 gray single fraction, the incidence of vertebral compression is 39%, whereas Cunha series, which is a fractionated regime, it is only 11%. So if you do a fractionated regime, then the risk of vertebral compression fracture significantly comes down. So if there's a osteolytic tumors, those more than 20 gray, lung histology, or age more than 55, they are at higher risk of having a vertebral compression fracture. And another interesting thing is almost 50% of the patients which have a vertebral compression fracture in this series require some kind of surgical interventions required. Now, when we talk about the pathophysiology of vertebral compression fracture, it is a spinal metastasis with both osteolytic and osteoblastic lesions, which causes architectural changes, loss of mineral density, which causes reduction in vertebral bone quality. On the same time, when with the radiation also, there's a damage in collagen, there's osteoradionecrosis, and which also causes vertebral bone quality damage. So this vertebral bone quality damage ultimately result in vertebral compression fracture. The future of spinal SBRT will depend how we will handle this collagen damage and architectural changes after the radiation. Now we know that vertebral compression fracture depends on the dose per fraction. But also the interesting thing is that it is not only the dose per fraction, it is the high dose region within the PTV that is also important to determine it for the spinal compression fracture. So we always should ensure that hot region inside the PTV is less or minimal and should be reduced as much as possible. And that also one determined for spinal compression fracture. In myelopathy, with the conventional fractionation, the risk is 0.3 to 0.5%, whereas with SBRT, it is 1 to 5% risk of radiation myelitis. Latent time for radiation myelitis in conventional fraction is 18 months, with SBRT it is 12 months, and re-radiation is with 6 months. So in re-radiation setting, patients have higher risk of myelopathy, and the latent time to myelopathy is very short. So we need to always contour the spinal cord and thecal sac and respect the tolerance. MRI scan is done to define the thecal sac. CT myelogram is done to define the spinal cord. And when we are contouring the spinal cord, we need to give a PRB margin of 1 to 3 millimeter, depending on the region where we are treating. Whole spinal canal is not contoured as OAR, because if you contour the whole spinal canal, then the PTV coverage may be compromised, and some part of the PTV may be underdosed, and the chance of marginal recurrences are going to be high. Cauda equina may have a different kind of constraint and need to be contoured separately. And instead of D max, which has higher uncertainty, we always consider near max dose, which is 0.03 cc, which is a better representation of the max dose. And those patients who have myelopathy, there's a white matter changes that is predominant on histopathology. Now, when you see the literature on myelopathy, there is not many incidences of myelopathy that has been reported. The main reason why it is reported because the incidences are less, and also maybe some of the recurrence of symptoms, which may be radiation myelitis, are considered as recurrence of the disease, and maybe there is an underreporting of myelopathy after radiation. So we need to have a prospective database to find out the actual incidence of myelopathy with a long-term follow-up. Now, with the spinal cord SBRT, there are recommendations which actually determine the radiation myelitis. So there are different formulas which actually has predicted the risk of radiation myelitis with the max dose to the spine. Usually, if it is a 1 fraction, 14 gray, 2 fraction 17, 3 fraction 20 gray, 4 fraction 23, and 5 fraction 25 gray max dose to the spine, which determines the radiation myelitis risk of less than 1%. It is 0.03 cc or near max dose, which is considered for the calculation. In case of re-radiation setting in a recurrence of symptoms, the cumulative dose is of the thecal sac is considered less than 70 gray. Re-SBRT thecal sac dose should be less than 25 gray, and prior dose and the time interval between the radiations are taken into consideration, and minimum time interval is 5 months after 5 months after the initial radiation is done. Now, there is some interesting fact about myelitis after radiation. There are 3 types of radiation myelitis happens. One is a type 1, which is the white matter changes where the median time is 3.6 months. And the type 3 is a parenchymal changes, which happens in 10 months. But the vascular changes, which is the type 2, which happens in 29 months. So risk of radiation myelitis of 1% in a short-term follow-up, but in long-term follow-up, the incidence may be a little different because the vascular changes may happen up to 2 years of time. So there is a need for a long-term follow-up to conclude the actual incidence of myelitis. There are some prospective database which has shown that in the long run, long-term follow-up, there is not much change in terms of myelitis, but it has to come in a prospective database setting from an appropriate study protocol. Now, esophagitis, nauseas are relatively rare with its SBRT. It is 2% and grade 2 toxicities, which are usually self-limiting. Now, if we consider infield failures as complications, then there are some interesting facts. Now, patients who have been treated before with SBRT for the spine have a higher risk of marginal recurrences because in those patients, we will try to avoid the area which has been treated before. In that process, some area of the disease also is undercovered, and there is a marginal recurrences happens. Post-op spines have a higher incidence of infield failures because of contouring, and fusions of MRI and CT may not be appropriate in post-op setting where we are not able to appropriately cover the target on the MRI and CT scan. And if the epidural space is involved, then there is a risk of higher infield recurrence. That is because of we want to respect the spinal cord tolerance, and in that process, the PTV gets less dose. So 71 to 85% of the infield recurrences happens in the epidural space region. So how to reduce this epidural space failure of infield failures? Are downgrading of tumors if there's epidural space involvement. If epidural space is involved, we should plan for surgery first and then plan for SBRT. It is, and usually we with the spinal tolerance, as we were discussing, was considered highly conservative. So sometimes we need to allow some dose to the spine to have appropriate PTV coverage. MRI need to be done, contouring should be done to reduce the geographical miss in post-op settings, and sometimes the systemic therapy may help in reducing the infield recurrences. Now, in treatment delivery, immobilization is critical for SBRT spine because we give such a less PTV margin that appropriate or rigid immobilization is going to help us to deliver the dose which we have planned. Thin slice scans, MR sequences in post-op settings where there is an implant is important to have a proper contouring. GTB is contoured on CT scan, whereas means spinal cord is contoured on MRI scans. Planning is done, and where dose is respected, mostly the spine. PTV coverage is done appropriately. Usually 95% coverage is considered, and high dose region is usually restricted as less as possible. In delivery, CT based matching is considered standard because most of the centers do that. There is something interesting that robotic real-time matching, which also takes care of the emulation issues and patient setup. It may have a better treatment delivery position, but there is no randomized data or possibility database which is comparing the CT-based matching versus robotic real-time matching in seeing the acute toxicities and infield recurrences. So there can be interesting study between comparison of infield failures and toxicities with robotic radiosurgery based matching, real-time matching, and in CT-based matching. Now, there is another concern that patients treated with prone and supine position may have a different complication profile because dose to the small intestine is going to be different in prone and supine position, but we have a interesting dosimetric data which has shown there is not much difference in the dose compared in when we are treating with supine and prone position. Many times we need to treat multiple vertebrae with SBRT, especially if they are close by. Then usually we plan both the vertebrae separately, do a sum plan, and then you see the dose to the spine, and accordingly the PTV dose is prescribed. Sometimes we treat sacral spine with SBRT, and in that case, thecal sac should be contoured separately, and cauda equina need to be contoured separately because cauda equina may have a different constraint to the thecal sac. In clinical situations, especially in CA breast with bone metastasis luminal A on tamoxifen for long and presenting with weakness of lower limbs and back pain, we consider it as a bone metastasis. But we need to take into account a clinical situation like this, where patient have a lesion in the spine, but it is a osteoporosis of the vertebra that is there. But these clinical symptoms, this weakness is due to the intramedullary metastasis. So we need to differentiate between the osteoporosis of the spine and other neurological symptoms, which is causing the the clinical symptoms of these patients, especially CF breast cancer patients on tamoxifen for long. There is another very interesting indication for radiosurgery for benign tumors of the spine. It is a vertebral hemangiomas. We also have a small series of vertebral hemangiomas treated with SBRT, and hopefully in future, when you have a long-term database from multiple centers, this can be also a standard of care in vertebral hemangioma with SBRT. Now, if you take the take-home message of spinal SBRT toxicities, SBRT spine is relatively a safe process. Less than 5% of the patient have significant toxicity which requires some kind of interventions. 10% of the patients have a risk of vertebral compression fracture, but only 5% needs intervention. 19% of the patients have pain flare, but that can be reduced with prophylactic steroids, and mostly symptomatic treatment is done. 1% of the patients have risk of myelitis, and this is the limiting factor, and we need to improve on that to ensure that a spinal SBRT is there to go for a long way. Esophageal toxicities usually is rare and is less than 2% grade 2 toxicities. Infield recurrences are high in epidural involvement in post-op settings due to more low marginal dose, and dose to the spinal cord is very we need to be considered appropriately to reduce the incidence of infield recurrences. Vertebral compression fracture is high in unstable spine, where the high dose is given and in deformity. Appropriate case selections and treatment delivery will reduce the toxicity in most of the situations. So I thank my team, my radiation oncologists, neurosurgeons, radiologists, medical oncologists, and all my residents for this work. Thank you.